Hello everybody, Razorblade Mango here, and today I want to talk about live services. Actually, instead of just talking about that, I want to zoom in and focus on one specific publisher that I feel like encompasses pretty much everything wrong with live services nowadays. And a publisher, weirdly enough, doesn't seem to get as much flack for their stuff as, say, EA or Warner Brothers or Activision, and that company is Ubisoft. Which, Ubisoft is a company that I actually used to really like back in the day, and I'll get to my history with them in a bit. But I feel like Ubisoft nowadays, they have this weird, almost protective shield of followers around them. It's so strange. Like, when you criticize an EA game or you criticize an Activision game, there doesn't really seem to be a lot of pushback to that. There seems to always be a general consensus that, oh yeah, EA, ooh yeah, stay away from them. Oh, Activision, ooh, except maybe the Blizzard games. I think Overwatch still kind of has that protective shield around it, even though Overwatch is one of the most shamelessly manipulative and greedy games out there. Even Warner Brothers, weirdly enough, has a decent following. When I did my Mortal Kombat 11 video, I still got quite a few people that, you know, in the comments or privately messaged me telling me how wrong I am, the spam comments with all that. There's a weird pushback against those companies, and even with Ubisoft, there is one. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Ubisoft has a very almost jokey personality to it. They have this weird aura about them that's present at all of their E3 shows, where they come out and they're all about fun and goofy and woohoo, and it's all cringy, and it just and I guess that kind of makes people, you know, be kind of endearing towards them. I guess I've never fallen into that trap, because I see Ubisoft for what they really are, and to me, they're not the worst publisher around, because EA is in existence, and EA or Activision or EA, one of the two, they're almost equally terrible. Ubisoft is coming up on like a third place or something between those two, or actually maybe even more than Warner Brothers. No, Warner Brothers I think is still the worst, one of the worst anyway. EA might be the worst, Activision might be the worst, who knows. It depends on that number one spot is interchangeable depending on how I feel today. But we're talking about Ubisoft, and the reason for this video is that Ubisoft has kind of been one of the main companies to really jump aboard the live service train that has been taking over the industry for the last, really taking hold inside the industry for the last 2 years. And it's only going to get worse, ladies and gentlemen. So, Ubisoft. Back at the beginning of 2018, there actually was a conference call, one of their financial reports, where Ubisoft basically said, for lack of a better word, is that they are no longer focusing on making games. They're focusing on making platforms, i.e. live services. So they had this whole thing where Yves Guillemot come out, who's the head honcho there, or one of the head honchos there, I think he's the CEO, who said that it was like in this enormous annual report that people are spending more money than ever on live services, and we at Ubisoft are basically going to try to transform every single game, quote, that we've got into a live service. Why? Because live services have recurring revenue, they have more of a lifetime value, they have high user engagement, and this is coming directly from their slideshows that they release to the public regarding this. There's even a column in one of them where they put game in the past, where they don't consider games to be a big part of their thing now. That's all in the past. It's live services are the future. We're not interested in games, we're not interested in video games, we're interested in live services, which I think is terrible, and I think is a huge mistake. Now, that might not seem like a huge mistake from Ubisoft's perspective, and certainly from a lot of people's perspective, but you gotta understand, Ubisoft is not in its own little bubble, okay? They do not own the market. They are competing with every single other publisher out there that wants to have their own live services. So, to me, this is a really short-sighted mindset from Ubisoft, but we'll get to that later. And in my opinion, Ubisoft over the last, oh god, not even 2 years, maybe even 3, 4, 5 years now, has slowly transformed its output and library of games into basically a collection of games that I feel like are getting to the point of being interchangeable nowadays. All of its games can either fall into one or two categories. They're either going to fall into the single-player open-world games, because not only do they want to make live services, they want to make every single game that they make now an open-world game, which is going to cost a lot more money. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. So they're either going to make these big, gigantic open-world single-player games with a lot of content in them, quote, or they're going to have a multiplayer game that historically has gone on where the first year is crap, but it gets better after the first year, where we saw that with Siege and For Honor and The Division, and now we're getting new multiplayer games coming out that are probably going to go through the same thing, because Ubisoft isn't capable of learning. And in my opinion, this has just transformed Ubisoft into maybe the most boring publisher around. Like EA is scum. EA is predictable, but EA is not boring. Occasionally, they will make something great. And yes, I'm going to use the word great with EA, because I think, like a lot of these publishers, EA is capable of making fantastic games. Just look at Titanfall 2. Titanfall 2 is one of my favorite games ever made. I can't believe that thing came from EA. That game is content rich. It has a phenomenal single-player campaign. It's got a great multiplayer component that's not botched with microtransactions. It is a fantastic game. Even Ubisoft. And I have my own history with Ubisoft. I remember when I was in 7th grade, one of the defining moments when I was in 7th grade was getting the Game Informer that had the very first Assassin's Creed game as its cover story. Back then, I was so excited for Assassin's Creed. I remember poring over those pages, reading everything that I could about Assassin's Creed. I was hooked on the concept. And back then, Assassin's Creed was fresh. It was exciting. It was something new from Ubisoft. And I grew up with Ubisoft as well. I grew up playing games like Splinter Cell, which the first 3 Splinter Cell games are great. Prince of Persia. I love the first Prince of Persia. I really like the second 2 that came after it. Since then, it's never really been that, but you know, even the old shooters like Ghost Recon, I like that. Those are fun. They make good games back in the day, but now it's just Ubisoft has fallen into this really predictable, boring pattern of single-player and multiplayer games that are all being terraformed into these live services, because every single thing has to be a live service. And not only on top of that, not only do they have to be a live service, they have to be open world. They have to have a lot of microtransactions in them. They have to have an obscene amount of cosmetic microtransactions in them, an obscene amount of cosmetic DLC. They have to have multi-tiered special editions. You got your standard, deluxe, gold, and you got some outrageously expensive, maybe more than one outrageously expensive collector's edition where you gotta literally have a spreadsheet to figure out what all this stuff is. And then when you not even that, they have paid promotions with Totino's and Alexa and all these other companies. And then Ubisoft wants to come around and complain about how little money that they're making and how much money they need. Well, I don't think anyone, put a gun to Yves Guillemot's head and told him that he had to make every single player and multiplayer game that they churn out a live service, and that they have to make it as expensive as possible. And it has to be like a fucking blockbuster. It has to have these graphics and huge open world. Again, it's the same thing I've said with a lot of these companies. They don't understand what middle tier games are anymore. Everything either has to be big or it doesn't exist. You gotta be a big game, or you don't even bother. You'll get an occasional thing like Grow Home. You'll get the upcoming Trials Rising, which that has its own problems, and very rarely you'll get smaller games in between. But a lot of them, even the South Park game, which the first game, Stick of Truth, gloriously made fun of DLC. But then the new one comes out, and it's like the new one's got the single player, it's got the standard edition, it's got the deluxe edition, it's got the gold edition, it's got the season pass. It's just, again, it just falls into Ubisoft's patterns. So, all right, let's take a look at all the games coming out in 2019 from Ubisoft. We got Trials Rising. Trials Rising has a season pass. Trials Rising has a gold edition. Trials Rising has loot boxes in it. Oh yeah, they're still doing loot boxes, guys. And even though people were like, what the fuck? There's loot boxes? What is this? And don't worry, it's just cosmetic only, said Ubisoft. And they basically just said fuck you to their audience. We're gonna do whatever the fuck we want. And people are like, what? Excuse me? So that already has put a sour taste in people's mouths. Far Cry New Dawn, that's got a deluxe edition as well. It hasn't been confirmed to have microtransactions in it, but considering that Far Cry 5 had microtransactions in it, I bet this one will, even though it's like a spin-off thing. It's only $40 though. I'll give them that. At least they aren't charging a full $60 for what's basically a asset flip of Far Cry 5. Then you've got The Division 2. Oh boy, do you got The Division 2. So, The Division 2. One of the biggest contention points with audiences is that they are selling stash space, which if you buy the deluxe edition, you basically get stash space, or I think it's the ultimate edition actually, you get stash space, the gold edition or whatever. I can't keep track of these anymore. So there's a regular edition, that's $60. There's a gold edition for 100, and there's an ultimate edition for 120. Now the gold edition is the one that comes with extra storage space, which for a looter, that's pretty important for a game. And it's also got the 3-day early access to the game, which, if you're playing a live service like this, having 3 days early access is pretty important. So, I think that's really shitty. Oh, and they jacked up the price even more compared to the past gold editions. Past gold editions used to be $90. Now it's $100. Now it's $110, because the nice steelbook case costs $10 extra apparently. Fuck off. What's next? Then we got Skull and Bones, which, oh my god, Skull and Bones. I was actually really looking forward to that when it was initially announced, and now I just could not give less of a shit, because it's a multiplayer game from Ubisoft. And haven't we learned by now that multiplayer games from Ubisoft don't really turn out that great until the year after it comes out? Have we not learned from For Honor? Have we not learned from Siege? Have we not learned from The Division? Huh? Nah? Okay. Well, Skull and Bones, it's their pirate game. And I really want a pirate game from Ubisoft again, because I love Black Flag. But it's a multiplayer only game. And even when you're playing the single player, you gotta have it connected online. Everything's gotta be online only now. Because, I don't know, fuck you, that's why. Which is just dumb. It's dumb. Fuck Skull and Bones. I have Kingdom Hearts 3 for my pirate adventure. I don't need Skull and Bones anymore. But the one game that inspired me to make this video is none other than Beyond Good and Evil 2, which to me represents a key example of how Ubisoft wants everything to be a live service. Doesn't matter if the series doesn't fit that model, doesn't matter if it's what the core audience wants. Everything has to be a live service. With Beyond Good and Evil 2, you've got bam, open world, bam, online multiplayer, online co-op, huge open world, gonna have lots of monetization to it, gonna have a fuckload of patches and updates, and it's going to be a continuing, evolving live service experience, even though people who loved the original game wanted a sequel that was linear and story driven and featured Jade as the main protagonist. And Beyond Good and Evil 2 has been one of the big white whales of the industry. And when it finally came time to reveal what this game was going to be like, people went, what the fuck are you doing? Because this is not at all what the first Beyond Good and Evil was. Because, God forbid, Ubisoft make a linear, story-driven, single-player experience. Oh no. No, 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 no. That's too expensive. That will bankrupt Ubisoft. They can't do that. It has to be open world. It has to be a live service. It has to be multiplayer. It has to be consistently connected to the internet. It has to have a ton of monetization to it. It has to be a prequel. So we can have this giant excuse to explore. Isn't even just an open world, it's an open galaxy now. Ooh, open galaxy. They're going to have procedurally generated planets. And I'm sure that's going to be really expensive to make. Right? Yeah. Oh, you need more money? Oh, well, fuck. I guess they're going to have loot boxes and microtransactions and obscene cosmetic DLC on top of that. Oh, by the way, please contribute to Joseph Gordon-Levitt's website your artwork and not get paid for it. Please do that. Actually, I think they are getting paid for it, but still, that's just a slimy fucking tactic on their part. You see where I'm getting at here? Beyond Good and Evil. And this is coming from somebody who is not that crazy about the first Beyond Good and Evil, but my fucking heart breaks for the people that were really looking forward to Beyond Good and Evil 2. They wanted a sequel with Jade because the first one ended on kind of a cliffhanger, and now they're not going to get it. They're not going to get it. Because it's a prequel, and it's set 15 years before the first one, or whatever, some years before the first one, and it's online only, and it's an open world game, and it's live service, and it's multiplayer, and it's co-op, and it's procedurally generated. Yeah. Great. Makes me not want another Splinter Cell from them. I know I complained when Splinter Cell wasn't revealed. I'm pretty sure they're working on one, but it genuinely makes me nervous what they're gonna do to Splinter Cell. Concerning what they've done to every other Tom Clancy game, they've got The Division, which is boring. They've got Ghost Recon Wildlands, which is boring, bored the shit out of me when I played that. And Splinter Cell, oh well, yeah, they've got Sam Fisher back, but in an open world stealth game now. Okay, with live service elements, is he gonna have to be constantly connected to the internet now, like every other Ubisoft game that's not Assassin's Creed or Far Cry? Okay, makes me nervous for another Prince of Persia, because I don't want these franchises that I enjoyed as a kid ruined. I don't. I've seen that enough with the games that are coming out these days. I don't want to see that with Sam Fisher and Prince of Persia. I really don't. And Watch Dogs. Like, Watch Dogs 2 was one of my favorite games of the year it came out. I think that's Ubisoft's best game in a very long time. And I just don't care anymore. I honestly, like, and it makes me sad because the saddest part about all of this, like EA, is that Ubisoft is fully capable of being a very good publisher. When they aren't focused, like solely focused with tunnel vision, narrow tunnel vision, when they aren't focused on shoving in live service elements and microtransactions into every single one of their games, they have the full capacity to make damn good games. Like I said, Watch Dogs 2 is great. Far Cry 3 and 4 are great. Even Far Cry Primal is really good. Trials Fusion is a really fun game. Assassin's Creed Black Flag is really good. Assassin's Creed 2 is great. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, Revelations. I'll even go so far as to defend some elements of 3. But past Unity, I haven't really given a shit about any of the games because it's just, they're all the same now. I don't see them really as a publisher anymore. I see them more as a factory. They just keep pumping out the same games with the same models, with the same monetization, with the same groan-inducing restrictions and requirements. It's just depressing as fuck. And I just don't care anymore about Ubisoft. They're just boring to me now. And what are the consequences of this? What is the future of Ubisoft? Well, the future of Ubisoft, I think they're not gonna stop. They're gonna keep going because it is profitable in the short. It is profitable in the short term. I'll give them that. It makes them a lot of money, lots and lots of money. But they've opened this Pandora's box, and now that the shareholders have gotten used to this idea of extremely high profit from them, like almost limitless profit from these microtransactions and live service elements and this like extra dollop of monetization on top of everything, the shareholders are just gonna want growth. They're not gonna be happy with a certain number. They want to see more on their investment. And I think Ubisoft, and we're already seeing signs of this with EA and Activision, is that they cannot keep doing this and remain healthy. They can't. It's not possible for them to keep making this amount of money consistently every single year. And it's not even going to be possible to go higher and higher and higher and higher, because there is a limit. There are limits to this stuff. Time is a big factor. Competition is a big factor. Like I said at the beginning of this video, Ubisoft are not the only ones making live services. You got Activision making them. You got EA making them. You got Warner Brothers making them. You got Capcom making them. You got Konami making them. And everybody just wants the piece of that pie, but they're not gonna get all the pie. It's gonna get fragmented into all these separate pieces, and they don't just want some money. They want all of it. They want all of the money in the world conceivable and possible, and that is not possible. They're gonna keep they're like a dog. They're like a dog that has a fucking piece of food stuck on its tail, and it's just gonna constantly chase its own tail until it gets tired and collapses from exhaustion. That's what these companies are doing right now. That is what we are witnessing. We're witnessing these companies going into this downward spiral of not being able to make enough money to satisfy their shareholders, to satisfy the people that they actually give a shit about, which, by the way, are not the customers. And this isn't good for anybody. It's not good for the games. Live services are not good for the games. They're not good for the shareholders. They're not good for the publishers. They're not good for the developers. And they are absolutely not good for the players. Because they need to make more money, and because the money that you are already giving them hand over fist is not enough for Ubisoft. It's not enough for EA. It's not enough for Activision. Look at Call of Duty. Call of Duty Black Ops 4 made $500 million in its first 3 days. Do you know what the shareholders said about that? They said that it was disappointing. $500 million in 3 days is disappointing. That is the level of excess that we have arrived at, where $500 million in 3 days is disappointing to some people. That's ridiculous. And these publishers, because they want more money, they are going to do their absolute damnedest to squeeze as much revenue from you as humanly fucking possible. And everyone is just gonna get tired of it. I'm already sick and tired of it. I'm tired to the point where if I even hear a company utter the word live service, no. Wash my hands of that? No. Unless it's from a company I trust, and that's a list that is decreasing, getting really tiny by the day. Unless it's a live service from a company I trust, I wipe my hands of that. Nope, not gonna touch it. I don't have time for live services. You know what I have time for these days? Games that respect my time. Games that don't make me pay over and over and over again so that I get the up-to-date experiences. Games that do not make me grind for hours upon hours upon hours upon hours upon hours upon hours on end to get minuscule cosmetic rewards. I go to work almost every day. I work a full-time job. Okay? When I come home from work, or before I'm going to work, if I want to play a video game, I don't want to play a video game that feels like work. Because all of these games now, they feel like work. with the exception of a few in the AAA gaming industry. Very few. A lot of these just feel like work. You got your daily rewards, you got your daily grinds, all that. It just feels like you're punching a clock. I don't want to play a game that makes me feel like I'm punching a clock. I'm doing that enough at work in real life that I actually get paid for. I don't want to pay a company to work. That is not how a video game is supposed to go. That's not how that's supposed to work. And that is the danger of these live services. So this basically just went from me talking about Ubisoft to talking about live service in general, but you get my point. Ubisoft is going down that path. They rode that train out of the station long ago, and they're right in the middle of it. And I think in a few years, if they're not already seeing it, they are going to see that spiral, the point go down, because publishers are going to look at Ubisoft and go, why aren't you making more money? Even though they crowed to their investors of how many billions of dollars they made last year, that's going to be the bar now. And publishers are not going to be happy if the bar is not met. They're going to want to exceed the bar. There will come a point where there is no more bar to be had. There are no more pegs on the wall to climb. You've reached the top. That's it. You're done. But that won't be good enough. It's never good enough. Never is. And again, I've said this so many times. These companies are consistently, without fail, damning the long-term consequences. They are damning the long-term issues in favor of making billions upon billions in the short term. They want money now. They want money right now. They don't care about player burnout. They don't care about competition. They don't care about long-term brand damage. They don't care about any of that. There's a reason that Titanfall 2 didn't sell as well as the original. There's a reason. Because A, competition with everything else, like Call of Duty and Battlefield, and B, because Titanfall 1 was such a massive disappointment to a lot of people because it was a rushed, empty game that had a season pass on top of it, and microtransactions. And it's the good games that suffer for it. It's not the disappointing ones. That's the shitty thing in the world of gaming. The good ones always get the boot in the ass. And the shitty ones end up making money. That's the most cases, though. So, Ubisoft is just going to keep doing what they're doing. They're going to run Beyond Good and Evil 2 into the ground. They're going to make people wish that they had never pestered Ubisoft to make a sequel to Beyond Good and Evil 2. Or Beyond Good and Evil. They're going to wish they hadn't. Because Beyond Good and Evil 2 is going to absolutely butcher what makes Beyond Good and Evil good. And it's sad. It really makes me sad to see that. My heart breaks for you guys. It really does. So anyway, that's my video about Ubisoft. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you see, subscribe. Let me know what you think about Ubisoft and live services and all that. And as always, thank you everyone who watches. Oh boy, I need to get some water. Alright, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.